Hello, hello, hello. That introduction was awesome. Thank you. I'm like, ooh, she's pretty sweet. But she was talking about me. So I am so grateful to be here today, and I look forward to meeting some of you after my talk. And I hope that the things that I've gone through in my journey to become a plastic surgeon and to start a business will inspire you to step into whatever it is that God has designed you for. So the topic that I want to talk about today is overcoming your fear and helping you to understand that whatever it is that you need to start, whatever it is that you want to do, you already have it. You have everything that you need to start. But most times we don't really see that when we're going through our lives. We focus on the things that we're missing. And a lot of times people think that it was easy for me to start my business because I'm a plastic surgeon. But first of all, it was really hard to become a plastic surgeon. So that was a huge feat in and of itself. So I'm not exempt from the struggles that everyone else goes through. But the other thing is that when I finally did become a plastic surgeon 16 years after I graduated from high school, it took me 16 years of school and training to say I'm a plastic surgeon. And it was a really long, grueling road and very inhumane in a lot of ways. But I kept going through it because I thought, once I'm done with my training, then, and so I thought I would have this awesome, fun career. And what I realized when I finished was that I was still in chains. So I took a job right after my training, and at first it seemed like it was awesome. I was making money finally. I was getting to do surgery on people. They were like choosing me, and I would be in the operating room like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe this lady trusted me to do this. And so it was a lot of fun for about 4 or 5 months. And then I realized I started noticing that I would pull into the parking lot of my practice, and I wouldn't want to get out the car. And this was the type of thing that was happening when I was in residency. I would pull into that parking garage of the hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning and not want to get out the car. And the little jobs that I had all along the way in my training, before training when I was in college and stuff, pull into the parking lot, not want to get out of my car. And it took about 4 or 5 months of me making a lot of money and doing, surgeries on these ladies that trusted me before I started to pull into the parking lot and have the exact same feeling of not wanting to get out the car, like I don't want to go in there. And I would sit there until the practice manager would call me and say, your patient's in the room. And then I would get out the car and go in and go through the motions just like I had been doing before. And I at that point I'm like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. It was something missing. Because I enjoyed plastic surgery, but the way that I was forced to practice it, having this job that these people gave me, the way that I was forced to practice it, it took the fun out of it. And I felt like I was just kind of like in the rat race, like in a hamster wheel, in a straitjacket, all these things. So I started to think about what I was going to do next, because I did decide that I wasn't going to live like that for the rest of my life. I was okay with doing it for training. But once I was like sort of in my career, I wasn't willing to do that anymore. So I started thinking about starting my own practice. And I started doing all the steps it took to try to get a practice off the ground. Me and my husband started working on a business plan. We started thinking about cities to move to, because I was living in this small town that I knew I didn't want to stay in. And we were going through all the motions, but I ran into a brick wall, and I wasn't able to get funding to start the business. And so I got scared. And then I decided to just sit there at that job for at least another year. My contract was due to be up, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna renew for another year. And then I got pushed, basically. So a lot of us will be in this type of situation where we feel like there's something more, not really sure what that something more is, but you just start feeling kind of restless. Just like the previous speaker talked about, is you start to get those little whispers from God that's telling you something else is supposed to be happening. And it was kind of awkward for me too, because when I would voice to people that I wasn't happy, they would look at me like I was crazy, like, but you're a plastic surgeon. You know, it's when you have a position that is seemingly so great to everybody else, but inside of you, you still feel like stuff is off. You have to listen to that and not listen to the other people. So I got into this place where I really couldn't even talk about it with anybody because people looked at me like, you're ungrateful. Like, what's wrong with you? I wish I was a plastic surgeon. If I was a plastic surgeon, I would be doing this or I would be doing that. You know, that's what people do to make you feel. It's what people do to keep you stuck, and you don't need that. So I just kind of ignored all that stuff, and I kept trying to push forward. But then I couldn't push forward when I couldn't get any money to start this business that I wanted to start. So I just kind of chickened out. So then God pushed me. And he'll push you too if you chicken out for too long. So the push came for me on February 24th of 2015. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was minus 16 degrees outside. And at that point, when this whole thing started, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. It was literally 5 o'clock on the nose. And I know that because I was asleep and I woke up to like this loud noise and like the house shook. And I'm like, I woke up and I opened my eyes and turned my head over to the clock and it said 5:00. And then I noticed my husband wasn't laying next to me, so I'm like, he must have fell asleep in the den. And then I thought, well, did he fall? Because he's a big guy. He's 6'5", 240. So I'm like, maybe he fell in the living room. And then I heard the bump. I heard that big thud again, that loud noise again, and the house shook. So then I'm like, what is going on? It's like dark and scary and stuff is shaking. So I got up out of the bed and I walked toward the living room, headed toward the den, and I see this bright, it's dark, it's darkness at this point. So this bright light is coming through my living room window, and it looked like daytime, but it was night. And it was orange and it was creepy. I'm like, is it the rapture coming? Like, is it a UFO in my front yard? Like what is it? So I look out the front window and it's just like this white cloud of smoke that had overtook my front yard. And I see that basically there's a fire coming from in front of my garage. And my husband's truck is parked out there. So I made the assumption that his truck was on fire because I couldn't actually see the truck from that view. So I went running, because at this point, the explosions are still happening, the house keeps still shaking, I can hear windows bursting out of his truck, and I run into the living room and wake him up, and I'm like, the truck's on fire, get up! You know, get up, get up, get up! And so we're trying to get our children up. I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old that are asleep in their beds. It's minus 15 degrees outside. I need to call 911. I need to get my kids. We need to get out before the truck blows up our house. All this stuff is going through my head. And we get out of the house, run around to the front, and I see, well, this is the picture the neighbor took from across the street. They were taking pictures. They blew my husband, so they blew his truck up. Someone did. I still don't know who did that. But they blew his truck up, and this is what it looked like when the fire was put out. That fire was so hot. You see there's no engine left. Like, the stuff inside the car melted, like it was gone. Like, it was a professional arsonist that set that fire. Is basically what the fire marshal said. But when we got around to the front of the house, this is what I saw. It says, "Move nigger doctor KKK." They wrote on my house. So this plan I had to stay put for a year. That plan was out the window as soon as we saw that on the front of the house. I had to go. People were like, oh, if you stay, if you leave, then they win. I'm like, well, consider them the victors because I'm out. It's 2015 at this point, and I'm like, I didn't even know people still did this. I'm like, people still do this? Like, that truck, look at this truck. Like, that's like off of a gangster movie or something. So I'm like, okay, I gotta go. Money or no money, I gotta go. So I'm like, and you're probably like, she had money, she's a plastic surgeon. Actually, I kind of didn't. So, so I grew up on the east side of Cleveland. I was one of 6 children. My father was a crackhead. My mother was a hairstylist. I didn't have money until I got this job. And so when I got this job, making that money, I did the same thing any other poor person would have done. I spent it. Which is part of why I couldn't get a loan, because they're like, you make this much and you have what saved? They're like, are you kidding me? Nobody would give me any money because they were like, you didn't do nothing with the money you made for these last 3 years. So I was kind of in a bad spot. So that was the plan, to stay safe. So I had to go anyway, though. At this point, there was no other option in my mind. So I was more afraid of staying than I was of taking the leap. So it was kind of like I got pushed off the cliff. I decided, well, when all this happened, of course, a lot of things were going through my mind. I was afraid. I was wondering who did it. That's a whole nother story, but nobody was really trying to figure out who did this to us. And that was really frustrating and hurtful. And I'm like, I'm a surgeon in this community, and nobody even cares to figure out who violated my family. And I kind of got stuck in that for a while. And it kept me paused and stagnant. And so one day I just decided, like, this isn't getting me anywhere. They still aren't finding the person who did it. They don't care to find who did it. And as long as I'm still mad and ranting and raving about it every day, I'm getting nowhere, and I'm still in this scary place. So I made a decision one day that I was going to not be a victim anymore, and I was going to remove the control from them as far as making my life feel safe, and decided that I was going to be a victor in all this. And whoever did it, because I knew they were watching me, anybody who goes to those types of lengths to scare somebody is watching your every move. So I said, I'm going to let them watch me be great. So I packed my family up in the night. We moved at night. We didn't know who we could trust, and we moved in the middle of the night to put all of our stuff in 2 U-Haul trucks. Because at this point, I'm trying to like save as much money as I can, so like no movers, they cost too much. We did everything like on the small scale to save as much as we could, because I really didn't know what I was stepping into. And we moved all of our stuff to Atlanta, Georgia, and put it in a storage facility. And then we stayed in a motel. We stayed in the La Quinta Inn. My husband and my 2 kids. Which picture is that? Oh, okay. We stayed in a hotel with my husband and my 2 children, while we tried to figure out how to set up a plastic surgery practice. I didn't know anything about setting up a practice. They teach you how to do surgery in residency. They don't teach you anything about business. And I knew nothing about business. I didn't have any doctors in my family, so I couldn't just be like, hey, Dad, how do I set up this practice? Or go join his, or I couldn't do that stuff. So I had to go ahead and figure out what it was that I had, as opposed to focusing on the things that I didn't have. So when I was focused on what I didn't have, that made me decide to sit tight for another year. So I decided that I wasn't gonna think about what I was lacking, I was gonna think about what I had. So I like to use the phrase, what's in your refrigerator, and I'll tell you a story to help you understand what that means. When I was growing up, my mom is from the South, from Alabama, and she would put us all in the car and drive us down south every summer when school let out, and we would spend the summer there with my grandmother. And we weren't allowed to sit in the house all day. So once we woke up and had breakfast, we had to go outside and stay outside until we either had to use the bathroom, get something to eat, or go to sleep. Otherwise, you were outside. So I remember running into the house when I would get hungry or thirsty and looking in the refrigerator, and it looked like nothing was in there. Everything I saw in the refrigerator was white. It was like lard, eggs, buttermilk. Maybe if I saw something with color, it would be like some greens, but they weren't cooked. It was like hard stuff. So you're like, man, dang. So now just get a piece of bread or something and eat that and run outside and play. Then my grandmother called us in for dinner, and it would be like a feast. It would be like fried chicken and macaroni and cheese and greens and homemade biscuits. And I'm like, Grandma, where did you get that food from? Because when I looked in the refrigerator earlier, it was nothing in there. And you hadn't left. Like, I used to think she was a magician. Like, how the heck did she get this feast? And the food would be so good and hearty and filling, right? I was looking, and we looked in the same refrigerator. But what she saw and what I saw were 2 totally different things. I was looking for something quick and easy and ready, and something like the equivalent of a Lunchable, right? And I didn't see that, so I'm like, we ain't got no food. And my grandmother, she looked in there and she saw the ingredients to all these different things that she would end up preparing for us and that we would enjoy, and we would be full and fat and happy after she finished creating this feast from us from the exact same stuff that I saw but didn't see. And so I always challenge people to look in their lives, look in your refrigerator, if you will, and see what it is that you have that you're overlooking that is the ingredients to something great. Because all the things that we go through in our lives are our ingredients. And if you think about it, buttermilk, if you just drink it, is disgusting. Right? It's nasty. You're not going to go and stick a spoon in a stick of lard and put it in your mouth. But you can fry some chicken in it, right? So you want to figure out what those things are that you've gone through in your life that maybe are buttermilk, and maybe it's cornmeal, or it's raw chicken, or it's greens that haven't been picked yet, and figure out how to put those things together to create your feast. So I challenge all of you to look and see what's in your refrigerator. So once you do that, once you decide that, once you've been pushed, if it comes to being pushed, as everybody doesn't have to be pushed. Some people are just enlightened all the time already, and they just know to just follow their dreams and go and do what God purposed you to do. And then there's people like me who have to get a truck blown up in their yard to make them leave. So once you get pushed, then the shift still doesn't have to happen if you keep ignoring it. Because sometimes people get pushed and they still don't go anywhere. So you have people like that get fired or laid off from a job. They might have been working a business like as a hobby almost. I mean, you're not treating it like a business if you're working another job too all day long. So they might be doing it on the side, and then they lose their job. And in my opinion, that's the push to make you go and push and put that business first and make it work for you. But sometimes you'll get people, they'll get pushed and then they'll go find another job. It's like, well, you just got fired from that job. You have a business. This is your chance. This is a sign that maybe you should. So you can still not go into the shift if you ignore the push. So just if you get pushed, just don't ignore it, because he'll push you again later, and each time it's bigger. So when a truck blew up in my yard, that was big enough. It was time for me to go ahead and step into the shift part. So in the shift, what you have to do if you want to go ahead and shift, you need to make the decision, commit to the decision, go all in, be very intentional about what it is that you're doing. So I didn't know all the steps, but whenever I would take another step, it was not just haphazardly. There was a intention behind each move that I made once that truck blew up in my yard. So that's very important for you to do. There's going to be some risk involved in it. So if you're waiting for it to be perfectly safe and no risk involved, and you just go straight into that next phase without any trouble, look again. That's not how it goes. So I look cute right there, don't I? So here's what I did. I finished out my contract, because my contract wasn't up. When that happened, my contract wasn't up for 4 more months. And we moved on June 1st, and my contract wasn't up until July 31st. So I would drive from Georgia to Indiana once a week to work. So I finished my obligations, but I did not spend one more night in Richmond, Indiana after that whole thing happened. I finished that out, and I started to make strategic connections with people when I was in Atlanta. So that hairstyle right there is really what started my journey in Atlanta, to be able to let people know that I was there, because I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have friends there. I had extended family that I don't see. I haven't seen any of them since I moved there, so that tells you how close I was to those family members, and I've been there for 3 years now. But that hairstyle, what I did, this is going into the refrigerator thing again. So I had social media, I had my medical degree, I had my mouth. I've always been a big mouth and love to talk, and I used social media to figure out how to penetrate the celebrity circle of Atlanta. So that hairstyle was done by one of the hairstylists that does a lot of the housewives' hair. So I'm scrolling through my timeline, and it's like, this lady, I come up on one of the housewives' pages, and you know how they'll say what their glam is: hair by so-and-so, makeup by so-and-so, dress by so-and-so. Hair was by this girl. I went to her page. I needed my hair done, so I figured I would go to a place where I knew some of the people that I wanted to service would be. And the very first time I went to get my hair done by her, this is that day, I met an Olympian. Who you surround yourself with, like, she was so dead on with that talk. So I started to meet people there, and I started to make connections just from a hairstyle. I did not make any moves or spend any dime without it being something to move my goal forward. So I was just very I was thinking outside the box and very intentional in every move that I made. So this is my first little office. It's so cute, okay? So I I didn't do surgery from this space. I just, I didn't try to seek out surgical clients when I first got there because I still didn't have a loan yet, and I still didn't have the location for my real practice. But I was like running around this town, and I needed to make sure that I had a place to take people when I said, hi, I'm Dr. Myla, I'm a plastic surgeon. It's kind of weird to not have a place, like if they want something. So I found I rented an office. It's 150 square feet. And it was me and my assistant. And that's the whole thing. That's my whole business right there. And when I would meet people, my skin is something that I've always been complimented on, and it's something that I love to take care of people's skin, and so I use that as a medical spa. And the very first person that I serviced in Atlanta, Georgia was Ashley Graham. Isn't that something? They blew that truck up in my yard, and next thing you know, I'm servicing supermodels. That's the first person to pay me money as a plastic surgeon, a self-employed plastic surgeon, was Ashley Graham. And I had that off. I didn't wait until I had everything perfect, because if I had done that, then I would have been waiting for my real office. And then when I met her and she said, oh my gosh, your skin is great. How'd you get your skin to do that? And she said, I'm in town until Saturday. It was a Thursday. I'll come to your office. I got my credit card, whatever I need. I just want my skin like that. I wouldn't have had a place to take her if I was waiting for everything to be perfect. I made the best of what I had. I pulled out the stuff in my refrigerator and started cooking. Okay? So I took Ashley Graham to my office. She live streamed from there, and that video of our live stream is still on my page today. It's still on my page, on my website. So she helped me launch my business. She was like proud of me, proud of my story, like I want to help. I didn't ask her to do any of that stuff. She paid for her services. So I didn't ask her for nothing, and she just did it out of the kindness of her heart. Another woman trying to help another woman. So then, while that was happening, I finally found a space, and this is when the studs went up. It was exciting, okay? And now that's a Arabella 2.0. Yes. When I went through this whole process, I had no idea what I was like. Every day I woke up and a new thing happened that was moving me forward toward my goal, and I had no idea what I was doing really. You can't really plan for stuff, and God, He doesn't really show you everything all at once anyway, because if He shows you everything, you really will be scared and turn around and run. So it's kind of like Hansel and Gretel, like when they drop the breadcrumbs and then you just kind of pick up one and just keep going. You just take one step at a time. Don't worry about the whole huge picture. I'm not saying to just be reckless, but don't focus on the things that are lacking. Focus on what you have. Focus on what you have. The push, the shift, and now look, this is where I am now. That's my conference room. I have my very own conference room. Yeah, I felt really important when I took that picture. So basically you have to just make the decision, come up with a strategy, take one step at a time, even if it's a baby step, doesn't have to be huge steps. Focus on what you have. Dig in your refrigerator. Go look again in your refrigerator, because there's more stuff in there than you realize. All the stuff that you've gone through in your life was helping you and preparing you for what God has planned for you. And it's probably something way bigger than you ever could. I know it's something way bigger than you ever could imagine. That's all.
Dr. Myla Bennett.